off. So today I want to present Blitz, secure multi-hop payments without two-phase commits. I did this work together with Pedro Moreno-Sanchez, Aniket Kate, and Matteo Maffei. This work is about a new way of performing multi-hop payments. And today I want to present this to you. It has been recently accepted to Usenix 21. And today in the talk, I roughly want to go over two parts. The first one, I want to give you a quick motivation on why we actually should care about this and some background, also to make you familiar with the notation. And in the second one, I would present the construction itself. Also, on a side note, the preprint is available in this link. If you're curious, you can check it out, and you can also find it if you just Google for it, and you can read up more. So some words about the background and why we actually should care about this. Probably most of you are familiar with this, but Bitcoin has an inherent scalability problem. So we have this decentralized data structure, the blockchain, that actually records every transaction. This is nice because it provides us with this public verifiability. However, together with this global consensus and the permissionless nature of Bitcoin, we have this major drawback of having only around tens of transactions per second, whereas in other networks, like for instance Visa, we have a transaction rate of around 10,000 of transactions per second. So this is what we actually would expect from a payment network. And this is a known problem. There are actually quite some solution approaches for this. We can roughly group them into two different categories. The first one being on-chain solutions, where they basically try to tweak the consensus layer or introduce some graphs or sharding and whatnot. And the second one, focusing more on off-chain, the application layer, where actually they try to achieve some local consensus and fall back to the blockchain only when there are disputes. One of the more prominent solutions of this is the payment channel networks, which we also will focus on today. And there are also some quite widely used implementations of this, for instance, the Lightning Network, but also others. Now let me briefly go over some background and introduce some notation. Just very quickly a recap on what is a payment channel. So let's say we have two parties that already know that they want to perform several sequential payments between one another. So they don't want to perform these transactions on-chain due to fees and whatnot. So they decide to open a channel. With this channel now open, they can perform arbitrarily many payments off-chain. And when they close this channel, again, the final result is that only two transactions go on-chain. And so a bit more detail on this, how this is actually done in practice, but simplified. So Alice and Bob have, let's say, both 5 coins in some output on the blockchain. So can you see the cursor, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so we have these two outputs of Alice and of Bob, both holding 5 coins. And now when they want to open this payment channel, they create a new funding transaction, this one here. So the rounded rectangle represents the transaction. These incoming arrows, the inputs. And this rectangle inside the transaction, it's an output holding now these 10 coins. And this is spendable under this condition. And this condition simply is means that it requires the signature of both Alice and Bob to spend this. Okay, and initially, let's say they agree on the following. I mean, this is the distribution they started out with, right? So everyone, both of them have 5 coins. 5 go to Alice, 5 to Bob. And this transaction tx state, it's not put on chain. So this remains off chain. And now to perform a payment, what they do is they simply create a new transaction. Let's say tx state prime. And in this state, Alice now has only 4 coins and Bob has 6 coins. So basically 1 coin moved from Alice to Bob. Yes, and so this is a simplified view of payment channels. What happens with the old state is that it gets revoked. I won't go into detail how this is done, as it's not important for today, but basically they exchange some secret when they create this new state, so that if someone should publish an old state, the other party can, with this secret, steal all the money. So this is how we incentivize the good behavior of only ever publishing this latest state. And also, if they want to close it, they can go ahead and publish this latest state to close the channel. Yes. Are there any questions regarding this notation? Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear to me.
Okay, so then let me move on. So of course, it's not feasible to open a payment channel with everyone, since maintaining a payment channel requires locking up some funds, and we probably don't have enough funds to lock in a channel with every other person. So what we can do instead is we can link these channels together to form a payment channel network, which is basically a graph where the nodes are the users and the edges are the payment channels. And in a payment channel network, we can, so any 2 users that are connected via a path of channels can perform a payment, and we call this a multi-hop payment. And the Lightning Network, as I already mentioned, is a implementation of a payment channel network that achieves multi-hop payments in what we call a 2-phase commit scheme. And it uses HTLCs to achieve this. An HTLC is a simple Bitcoin script contract that allows me basically to pay. So yeah, I open this contract with my neighbor, and if this neighbor can show me some pre-image, then he will get the money. And after some time, if he doesn't show this pre-image, I will get this money back. So I will explain this now a bit in more detail, how the multi-hop payments work in the Lightning Network. Let's assume we have the following scenario. We have Alice, Bob, Carol, and Dave, and all of them. So there's a channel between Alice, Bob, and Carol, and Dave. And now Alice wants to pay 5 coins to Dave. So how it's done in the Lightning Network is, first Dave, it samples a random pre-image and computes the hash of this pre-image, resulting in Y, and sends this Y to Alice. Now Alice will start with Bob to update their channel to a new state which locks 5 coins in an HTLC. And so let me explain these parameters of the HTLC. This means that we have an HTLC between Alice and Bob. The HTLC is about 5 coins. Bob can get the money if he knows the pre-image to Y. So basically, if he knows this X that hashes to Y. Or Alice will get the money back after this timeout 3T. Okay. Okay, and after they updated the channel to have this HTLC, Bob will go ahead and do the same with Carol. He again will put 5 coins of their channel into an HTLC. Under the condition Y, Carol can claim it, or after now 2t, Bob will get it back. So this t actually gets smaller, and I will tell you in a second why this is the case. And once this is complete, then Carol will go ahead and do the same with Dave and update their channel. Okay, so this was the first phase of the 2 phases, right? So they locked this money in these HTLCs. And now when Dave is reached, what they do is Dave goes ahead and opens this HTLC with Carol. So he shows her this X, meaning that he is able to unlock this HTLC. And once Carol sees this, they can go ahead and update the channel again to a state where Dave got the money that was locked in the HTLC, or they could also go ahead and, so Dave could go ahead and claim this money on chain should Carol not cooperate. But let's say she does, and she will continue also with doing the same with Bob. So she will open their HTLC and Bob will open the HTLC he has with Alice. And when we are done, we have we are in the situation where 5 coins moved from Alice to Dave. And I said the timing, it grows from right to left. And this is necessary because assume that it was the same for everyone. Then if Dave were to claim this money of the HTLC in the last possible moment, then Carol would see this and not have enough time to react. So this time here in her HTLC with Bob needs to be larger so that she has enough time to also claim the money of the HTLC. And also on a side note, actually there's a per hop fee encoded, meaning that every intermediary just deducts some fee from the value and keeps it for themselves. So this is basically in exchange for their service. Okay, and now let's look at how an HTLC looks in our notation. Again, this is a bit simplified, but it's enough for our purposes. We can have this tx state, which is like last time, it spans from this funding transaction, which is the multisig of the 2 users, Alice and Bob. But now we have, in addition to the 2 outputs that belong to Alice and Bob respectively, we have another output that holds 3 coins coming from Alice, and they're spent in the following way, spendable in the following way. So either Alice can take it after this time 3t. So after this timeout 3t has expired, she can spend it by giving a signature that verifies under her public key. Or this second possibility is for Bob to spend it if he knows this pre-image X and gives a signature that verifies under his public key. So either we have this refund or this claim, basically. And this is how the contract looks like simplified. And now let me identify some properties of the Lightning payments. So I explained that we have a staggered collateral lock time, meaning that it grows from right to left. And it is linear in the number of users on the path. Okay, and this is a bit problematic because this is an amplification factor for griefing. And griefing is, for instance, an attack when a malicious sender opens a payment via some path to itself and then subsequently lets it fail so that the money stays locked for the whole duration. And since this duration is linear, he can lock up a significant amount of funds for a time linear in the path length, which is not desirable. And also if not only for this type of griefing, but also if we have a malicious intermediary that stops forwarding or opening the payment, or he's simply offline, then again, this limits the throughput of the network. Also, let me point out these 2 rounds that we had, this basically this committing and this opening round. The scheme relies on HTLCs being supported by the underlying blockchains, specifically relying on these hash conditions. And it's also susceptible to the wormhole attack, which is an attack that was pointed out by Malevolta and others. And I will just very briefly go over the essence of this attack. So you can see here we have a payment from Alice to Eve, and we have 2 malicious users, Bob and Dave, which surround one or more honest users. In this case, it's only Carol. And what they do in this attack is they open the payment as usual. They lock the payment in the first case as usual, but in this open phase, what happens is that Dave, so Eve opens her HTLC with Dave, but Dave won't open with Carol. Instead, he sends directly this X to Bob, and Bob again continues opening with Alice. So what happens is that these HTLCs between Bob and Carol and between Carol and Dave, they won't get opened, and they will actually refund after this timeout. And these other 2 HTLCs, they will actually be opened. So in the end, Bob receives 5 coins, but only has to pay 5 minus 3 times the fee. So what these two colluding users get is 3 times the fees, when they should actually only get 2 times the fee. And Carol, she does not get any fee, but she still has to lock up some of her coins for the full duration. So this is also not desirable. So with these properties in mind, let me go over some of the goals that we have now for our new construction. So obviously we want to have a multi-hop payment that provides the same balance security as the Lightning. We want it to be achievable in 1 round. It should only have a collateral lock time that is constant and not staggered or growing from right to left, for instance. It should require fewer scripting capabilities, and it should be resistant against this wormhole attack that I just showed. Okay, and so with this in mind, let's move to the part B of this presentation, where we'll start out with a naive way of doing multi-hop payments in 1 round. And then I will point out some problems and present a tentative solution. And we will iterate these steps a couple of times until we end up with the final solution of this construction. Okay, so let's start with the first attempt. In this scheme, we can see again, Alice wants to pay 5 coins to Dave. And what she does is she simply updates her channel with Bob optimistically already, so that Bob receives 5 coins. Then Bob, after receiving the 5 coins, he will go ahead and update his channel with Carol, so that Carol gets 5 coins and Carol does the same with Dave. And of course, if everyone is honest, then this is fine and it works nicely. But the very obvious problem with this scenario is that if we have a malicious user in the middle, for instance, Bob, then we have a problem, because now Bob can simply stop the payment and Alice will lose her money to Bob. Basically, Dave won't receive anything and he won't ship for instance, the goods that they agreed in exchange for the money. So this is bad. So what can we do to prevent this? Let's try another attempt. So we introduce the following. now Alice doesn't directly update her channel to Bob to a state where Bob has the money, but again, similar like in the Lightning, they update to this intermediary state where they put 5 money into some contract. And the contract looks as follows. After this timeout T, which we introduce, the money moves to Bob automatically. And before time T, Alice has the possibility to publish this refund transaction so that she gets the money back. Okay, and then Bob continues and does the same thing with Carol. Carol does the same with Dave. And now what we expect in this scheme is that after they set up the payment, Dave will give a confirmation to Alice that the payment has been set up. And if Alice receives this confirmation, she will just wait. And after time T, the payment becomes valid and Dave gets the money. If Alice does not receive this confirmation in time before this timeout T runs out, Alice will go ahead and publish the refund, and also the other parties will refund. So now with this construction, there are actually 2 problems. The first one is that the refund can be triggered by anybody, so not only by Alice, which is what we would expect actually. And the refund is also not atomic. So what could happen, for instance, is the following. We again have a malicious user on the path, in this case Bob, and what Bob does is that he waits until moments before this time T, and he triggers the refund by publishing the transaction, which means that Bob will get his money back, but all the other users will actually pay the money to the right neighbor because they let's say claim the money. And the end result will be that Carol will lose the money in this case, and Bob again will steal these 5 coins. So this is also not desirable. So what we could do in a third attempt is introduce the following. We again have some pre-image X that is chosen by the sender. And now we put another condition on the refunds, namely this knowing this pre-image X. So now to spend the refund, you need to know the pre-image to this h of X, and it has to be before this time T. This solves the problem that only Alice can refund. And now to give the other parties to enough time for the refund also, we again would need to introduce this growing time from left to right, right? Because otherwise Alice, if the timing was again the same, Alice could go ahead and publish this refund moments before time T, and Bob would not have enough time again to claim the refund as well. So to fix this, we would also need a growing time lock. But of course, this now is very similar to the Lightning payments, and it also doesn't achieve the goals that we specified in the beginning, right? So we have, first of all, the same scripting requirements now as in the Lightning, and also we have again the collateral time, which is linear. So how can we do this different? And now we are already more or less at the construction itself. So what we can do instead of having these hash conditions for the refund is we actually have a transaction that has an output for every user on the path except for the receiver. And this output, it can be very, very small. It's epsilon here. And in practice, it could be the smallest amount, let's say 1 Satoshi. And this output, so every user has one output, and this output is used as an additional input for this refund transaction. So this is why you see these arrows going from the epsilon to these refund transactions. And what this means in practice is that the refund it depends not only on the output inside of the state transaction, but also on this output in this transaction here, which is the enable refund transaction. And only if this is published, does this output go on chain. And only if this output is on chain, then this refund can happen. And since all of these epsilon outputs are inside of one transaction, this is a global event, this publishing of this transaction. And it is, so basically every user sees it at the same time. So now we don't need a growing time again. And also we have additionally this other property that we wanted, namely that only Alice can publish this txer, right? Because she only has the signature, because this comes from her. Okay, and now how this scheme would work is the first step is Alice creates this enable refund transaction with an output for every user on the path. And then they go ahead and update the channels again. So Alice updates her channel with Bob by putting locking 5 coins in this contract. Then Bob does the same with Carol, and Carol does the same with Dave. Now, when Dave received this, opens this construction with Carol, he will go ahead and send back a confirmation of this txer to Alice, so that she can actually see that it has not been tampered with, and it's actually the same one that she created. If this is the case, then she can simply go idle. And if she goes idle, this means that the transaction will not get published. And it means that the refunds cannot happen, and Dave will get the money. If she does not get the confirmation in time, or it has been changed by someone, let's say, then Alice will go ahead and publish this transaction txer, and everyone is able to refund. Okay, and now let's take a bit of a closer look on how this contract actually looks like. So let's look at this channel between Carol and Dave and how we can construct this Blitz contract. Okay, and here on this slide, I will try to explain it. We have again this transaction txState, similar like we had in the slides about the payment channels and about the HTLCs. We again have this output that belong to C, so to Carol, and the one that belongs to Dave. And this holds just a respective balance. And we have 5 coins which come from Carol, sorry, and they are locked in this contract. Okay, now what does this contract do? This contract says that after some time, capital T, and with a signature that verifies under Dave's public key, then this money can be spent. So basically then Dave can spend it, which represents this straight error going to Dave. Now for the refund, what we have is the following. So this output can be spent in a second way by providing a multisig of both parties, so the signature of both Carol and Dave. And what we can ensure by this is that Carol will create this transaction txr for tx refund, which has as input one of the outputs of this enable refund transaction, namely the one that belongs to Carol. And after creating this transaction, she sends it to Dave, and Dave will verify that she actually used this second additional input. And after seeing that it's correct, he will give his signature, which is why we underlined this PKD here, because it means that the transaction has been pre-signed by Dave. So this allows Carol to spend this on her own, but only in the way that they agreed upon, namely in this TX refund. And now let me point out this plus delta and what it means. So we actually always said that this is spendable only before time t, but unfortunately, other than this after time t condition, which can be easily expressed in the Bitcoin scripting language, right? With this check lock time verify opcode. The same cannot be done for this condition spendable only before time t. So instead, what we can do is a little trick by putting this relative time lock plus delta. And what this does is actually it means that the output that we can publish this transaction only if this time delta has expired since this transaction tx date was published to the blockchain. Okay, and what we achieve by this is that actually before time t only this tx refund can be published, and after time t both the tx refund and the tx pay can be published. But if let's say Dave tries to close this tx date by publishing it on chain, and it's after time t, right? Then Carol, if she now tries to publish this tx refund, and there is, let's say, some sort of race between them, then this tx pay will always get accepted, right? Because we have this relative time lock on the tx refund. Okay, so this is more or less how we implement this before time t condition. Okay, so this is the contract itself. Now let's zoom out again and go back to the construction. Right, and so now what we have here is again the construction. Let me point out some things here. So the intermediary users, if they're honest, how can they be sure that they don't lose money, right? So they can be sure in the following way. If, for instance, Carol has already opened with Bob, then she sees that his refund transaction is dependent on this txer. And now if she creates her refund with Dave, also being dependent on the transaction txer, she can always be sure that if Bob can refund, then also Carol can refund herself. And how can Alice know that Dave will be paid? I think I already mentioned it briefly. So Dave sends back this confirmation of txer, which means that he has already updated his channel to hold this Blitz contract, and Carol can only refund herself if Alice publishes this txer. So Alice can be sure that he will get the money if she does not publish this txer. So this basically leads us to two possible execution paths, if you will. The first one being the successful payment. And in this scenario, like I mentioned, Dave sends back the correct confirmation after this setup phase. Alice will not publish this txer. And after time t, the payment will be executed automatically. So basically what they could do, for instance, is they could just independently of the others, so we don't need this sequential communication round. Carol and Dave could go ahead and update their channel because they know, okay, it's after time t, the payment is done. Okay, so and similarly for the refund case, let's say that the setup failed in some step so that Dave does not send the confirmation back, or he sends an incorrect confirmation back. So then what will happen is that Alice will publish the transaction txer, and everyone sees this at the same time, and they will be able to refund. Okay. Do we have any questions up to this point?
Yes, something is unclear to me here, and yeah, what is unclear is, okay, like the attack I'm thinking, and I'm not sure what cannot happen, is I'm imagining Alice publishing this txer or assigning this txer to revert or to get back her money right before time t. And then by the time that this transaction is published and confirmed on the blockchain and then Bob sees it, time t has passed. and so he cannot revert anymore. And so Alice got the money back, but Bob did not. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's actually a good point, and I omitted this here. So what we actually do is that we put a relative time lock also on the outputs of txer, and so on these epsilon outputs, which is exactly of the time it takes to close the channel, plus this time delay delta that we also put on the tx refund, right? So actually what we would have here is also a relative time log of the time it takes to close the channel, and this time delta. And this removes this advantage of Alice, because now even if she closes her channel in advance and publishes this txer at the last possible moment, the outputs in the txer become only spendable after this relative time lock has expired. And this gives everyone enough time to close the channel and wait for this relative timeout of delta, right? And everyone can check that this relative time lock is present in all of the outputs of the txer because they see it, right?
Okay, can I ask a follow-up on that? So, but you mean that in the case that Alice actually publishes that time t minus delta minus epsilon, something small, everybody has this epsilon time, right, to publish their transactions, which is very small. In theory, you can censor it very quickly. I mean, Alice knows that she will publish it. The others have to see it and then react on it. And if it's this time is like one block, it is kind of tight. It's not the same as in Lightning, right? They have this big delta, each one of them. So I'm wondering, is the security the same in that sense?
So I'm not sure if I completely understood the question. You mean that is this timeout that we put here on the output of epsilon enough for the other users?
I mean, this. Let's say you publish. Yes, it is. Is it enough? Because if you publish it, if you calculate the time just before the others, yeah, exactly what you said. Actually, yes.
Okay, so actually, what we did in the paper is, of course, we have modeled this formally in an idealized model where delta is the upper bound on the blockchain delay, and this additional time that we put here is the upper bound on the time it takes to close the channel. So in this formal model, we always have enough time, but of course, in practice, you can set this timer to be even higher to account for this thing that you mentioned, right? So you could actually put in, if you wanted to, this delay that Lightning also uses of 1 day, right? And say that Alice has to publish, the timeout of this is actually 1 day, right?
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, I mean, you can also ask then in the end, but if not, let me move on because we're still not done. So right now, we have explained the construction so far, but of course, what you could wonder actually is that now this payment scheme, I mean, it's in one round and it's all good and nice, but if you want to use it in practice, and in practice, we usually assume that everyone will be honest, right? So in Lightning, actually, if everyone's honest, then you have instantaneous payments, right? So they will open the channel, all of this, the payment, all of this happens off chain, and then they will open the HTLCs, and also this happens off chain. So it's basically instantaneous payments. So, and in this case, you actually have to wait until this time capital T expires, which is in practice not very desirable, right? So what we do now is we introduce an optional second round, and this round it's really only for these efficiency reasons, right? So we showed that it's possible to have it in one round, but in practice you might want to have more efficient payments. So we introduce a second round, an optional one. And this goes like the following. So we again have our payment set up like this. Alice has received the confirmation of the txer. And now instead of going idle and waiting until this time t expires, what she does is she actually goes ahead and updates this channel with Bob so that the money moves from Alice to Bob. Okay, and this contract is not there anymore because they update the channel, right? And then Bob, he already received the money, so he's safe actually to go ahead and update his channel with Carol, and then Carol can do the same and update with Dave. So if they cooperate, then they can update their channels from left to right, and the payment will also be like in Lightning, it will be instantaneous, more or less. So, and now what actually happens if someone stops this, for instance? So if we have a malicious Bob, that stops this honest second round, then they can simply fall back to this first round and to this thing that after time t the payment will be accepted anyway, right? So Alice already updated the channel, so she already lost her money in this sense, so she won't publish the txer anymore, right? Because then Dave would not get the money, would not ship the product. So they can, if someone stops, they just fall back to this time after capital T. Okay, so this is for the efficiency, and now we also have another problem, which is concerning privacy, right? So we have this transaction txer that has an output for every user on the path. And this is actually, yeah, so one that sees this transaction txer, he will immediately know the whole path, right? This is not desirable. And also the input, it could be, for instance, if it's an input that can be linked to Alice, then also everyone knows the sender. So instead what we do is the following. For the outputs of txer, we take actually fresh addresses, and Alice can actually create fresh addresses that are under the control of the intermediary users by using stealth addresses. If you're curious about them, you can look at the paper, and we have linked to the original paper. And so Alice makes use of stealth addresses. So now the outputs of the txer, they are unlinkable. And also we require the input of the txer to be unlinkable to Alice. So this she can easily do by introducing for instance, an intermediary transaction that stays off chain, and this output belongs just to a fresh address of Alice, for instance. If you want, I can show you a slide later on this. But anyway, so we make the input of txer also unlinkable to Alice. And then for the path, we use this layered encryption, similar to the Lightning network itself. And so what we get in the end is actually that the users learn only about the direct neighbors. So they learn only who the direct neighbor is. And also more specifically, they also don't learn if the left neighbor is a sender or simply another intermediary, or if the right neighbor is a receiver or another intermediary. Unfortunately, what we do not achieve, and this is also not achieved in the Lightning network, is the stronger notion of relationship anonymity. And just very, very quickly, the payments in Blitz can be linked by looking at the transaction txer, or in Lightning by looking at the hash values. And also, very like the Lightning network, in the case of the on-chain disputes, the payments can also be linked together, again, by this txer or by the hash value itself. Okay, so let me also already wrap up this. So we introduced this new construction Blitz, and I quickly summarize these points here where they differ. So we showed actually that it's possible to have a secure multi-hop payments in one round. However, I mean, for the efficiency, we did in fact add this optional second round, which is only for efficiency, but still. The collateral time, we actually were able to reduce it from linear to constant, right? And as you already pointed out, this value in Lightning is set to 1 day. So this timeout, this growing timeout. And so for us, this is only constant, even if we also set it to 1 day. For the wormhole attack, the Lightning, as I showed, is susceptible to it. And ours is, of course, since it only has 1 round, it is secure against this. So no node can actually be skipped in this second round because there is none, right? And if they're skipped in the optional round, then they will still get the money after this timeout T. And finally, we got rid of this hash lock requirement, which of course we could also get rid of this maybe by using scriptless scripts, but anyway, it's interesting to mention this here. So yes, I'm already at the end of the presentation. So to take home for you, this is basically the first few points that I already summarized them on the last slide. Since we're already a bit short on time, I will not go over them again. Let me point out that we also did a simulation which shows the practical advantages of having constant collateral. So actually we showed that this increases the throughput of the payment channel network. And we showed this in a simulation. You can check it out in the ePrint paper, and we also have the GitHub repository with the code and the results. And also, if you're interested, we modeled this payment scheme formally in the UC framework, and also gave a security proof, but this is also in the ePrint in case you're interested. Okay, and with this, I want to thank you for your attention, and now I'm free to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for the wonderful talk, Lukas. So let me start with the first question. And I wanted to ask, you said that in the fast track case, if somebody sees an update from the left-hand side, they can be sure that it's okay to publish to the right-hand side. And you argued that this is okay because Alice has no incentive to publish the revocation transaction or whatever you call it. That targets everyone on the path. I was wondering if that is also secure against collusions between multiple parties on the path. I guess it is, but I'm not completely sure why. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Let me go back to this slide maybe. Yes. So it is indeed secure against also collusion. So you mean that Alice colludes with some of the intermediaries, right?
Yes, correct.
So okay, so let's go over the different cases. So for instance, assume that we have one honest intermediary whom they target with this collusion, right? So what could happen now is, if I understood you correctly, is that they start this fast track with Bob now, with Carol now, let's say. And then Alice goes ahead and still publishes this txer, right? Is this what the attack that you had in mind?
Yes. So maybe only Carol is honest, and then the rest of the people are dishonest and colluding with each other.
Right. Okay. So either we have the case that Carol already updated with Bob. So this means that she already got the money, right? So if now Alice publishes this refund enabling transaction, then the only thing that could happen to Carol is that she's also able to refund in this channel with Dave. And this would mean that she would get the money twice, in fact. So this is already not good. The other thing that could happen is that they, for instance, published this refund enabling transaction before this update with Carol happened. then we are just simply in the refund case. Now Carol can refund and Bob can refund. This is also fine. And I guess the only other case would be that they publish the txer after these two updates have already happened, but this would then simply have no impact.
Thank you. I think there's a few notes in the chat. I'm not sure if there's any questions there, and also if anyone else has any questions. Yeah.
If there's something relevant in the chat, please read it to me, because I don't know how I can access the chat.
I have a question before the chat, if it's possible. So there is this protocol, AMCU. Do you know it? So
Yes.
it also has constant collateral. Can you explain to me the differences? Like, why is this better?
So the difference here is that, so in the AMCU protocol, you put the path actually becomes, so they have a similar problem like we here. The path is leaked to everyone instantly. And as far as I know also, and maybe Pedro can correct me on this if I say something wrong, in AMCU, we also need the parties to collaboratively create this transaction that also serves as the global event there. Is this correct, Pedro?
Right. So I think that the two main differences is that in this work in Blitz, we use the same message pattern as the Lightning Network, meaning that every node only knows who is the one before and the one after in the path. And this makes it more compatible with the current onion routing and current message flow of the Lightning Network, let's say. From privacy, as Lukas said, this has better privacy in the sense that the whole path is not revealed to every participant in the payment. In AMCU, every participant needs to know which are all the other participants in the payment, and they must know each other because they need to create this joint transaction, this coin joint transaction of chain that serves as the global event. Here we do this global event through this txer, this single transaction that is done only by the sender. So these are the main two differences. So the settings of how messages are, and that user needs to know only previous and next node in the case of Blitz, and the privacy guarantees are better or stronger in Blitz than in MCU.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pedro.
Can you stay here on this slide for a second? I have a gray area here. Otherwise, really nice work and talk, and congrats. So I was not sure whether, so these epsilon UTXOs are added by each individual intermediaries along the path sequentially. Is this correct?
So these epsilons are actually created by the sender in the beginning. So the sender already knows the path in advance. This is also the case in the current Lightning implementation. And the sender will put for each of the intermediaries and himself one output here.
And as an intermediary, I will not forward it if the stealth address corresponding to myself is not correct, right? So this is the...
Indeed, you can check if your output is present, and if it's not, then you simply stop.
Okay, clever. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
And so Lukas, you mentioned that there are two ways where the payment can be successful. So one is without the fast track. So the payment goes to the receiver after this time T. The second is the fast track. So do you think there are use cases in practice for both, or they should use always the fast track?
So, I mean, for normal payments, I would expect that usually they would use the fast track, but there might also be applications where using this one round payment might be more advantageous. I mean, one of the things that we came up with in the paper is having something like a subscription service or a trial period. So where you set up the payment to some service, right? And during this trial period, you're free to refund yourself, meaning before this time capital T. And after the trial period expires, you will automatically pay the service.
Okay, we have a couple minutes for maybe one last question.
When lightning? When will we see this in practice? Hopefully.
I don't know. Hopefully soon. I don't know.
Yeah, we have talked to the Lightning developers about this, and they are now checking it out, because we just put the ePrint version, I think last week even. Yeah, we will see. We're talking to them, hopefully soon. I mean, in practice, we don't know whether it's like an immediate replacement of the current payment system or it's an alternative one. So I would say that at least it could be the case that we can see in the Lightning Network the current payments and Blitz payments, and let's see users which one they use and how it evolves in practice.
Cool.
Okay, any other questions before we wrap it up?
Was there something in the chat maybe? I cannot read it currently.
I think all the questions in the chat have been answered from what I checked, so that's all good. Okay, so if there's no more questions, let's thank Lukas again for the wonderful talk. That was great and very interesting.